So welcome to the second lecture when it comes to cash accounting. So like what we mentioned, for cash, what we're really looking for would be a lot of concepts. So it will talk about concepts about fraud, concepts about internal control, and then finally you take a deep dive in terms of cash accounting. So looking back at our session last week, basically we were already able to define fraud and internal control. We were also able to identify ano yung mga principles of internal control in order to make sure that we have reasonable assurance that our data is reliable and there's a reasonable assurance when it comes to safeguarding our assets. And then from there, binasag natin yung definition natin of what we think cash is in the layman's term. So we thought cash is just money, right? But again, when it comes to all the definitions, cash is more than money with different components, right? So you have your cash on hand, cash in bank, cash funds, and you even have cash equivalents. So in terms of like the test perspective, what I'm already telling you and I'm already giving heads up to everyone is that in terms of the concepts that are challenging in cash, dalawa lang naman yan. Petty cash fund and bank recon. So I'll trust na you will study the theory on what is cash, what is not cash. You have to be masters at identifying what is a cash item or what is a cash equivalent item. So I will trust na you'll do that on your part. On my end, what I want to do is expose you to a lot of examples. Today, we're gonna be focusing on bank recon. Kasi yun talaga yung parang medyo long prob for cash. And if you score high in bank recon, you'll probably get a higher chance of scoring high in the quizzes in the exams, right? And then, if we have time, we'll talk about petty cash, but if not, we'll talk about it on Thursday, right? So again, I leave the theory to you in terms of cash, fraud, and principles of internal control. Kindly go back to the recording session. Petty cash fund, um, we'll have a closer look on Thursday. But today, we're just gonna be talking about bank reconciliation, right? So, like what I mentioned, let's now take a deep dive into what we know as bank recon, right? So, what is bank recon? So, again, just a review. So, our definition of cash is that in the financial statement, there is only one line item called cash and cash equivalents. And this one line item will appear as the first line item in your current asset portion. Why is it the first line item? Because the nature of cash is that it's the most liquid. You can convert anything. So if you have cash, you can basically exchange it for goods, services, etc., etc. So cash and cash equivalents are the most liquid. And therefore, they're the first line item in your current asset. Now, in your notes, so one line item lang siya. But in your notes, in your financial statements, your cash and cash equivalents will actually be broken down into your cash and your cash equivalent. Namely, under cash, in the notes, it will highlight ilan ba yung cash on hand, ilan yung cash in bank, ilan yung nasa cash fund, and ilan yung cash equivalents. So now, as the name suggests, since we're taking a deep dive in bank reconciliation, out of these four subcategories, ang actually ma-affect lang would be yung cash in bank, right? So if petty cash fund ang na-affect is yung cash fund component, sa bank recon, ang na-affect would be cash in bank. So now, in the last session, we talked about cash in bank in terms of the theory related to it. Now, we mentioned that there are two accounts usually in a typical bank. You have your checking account or your demand deposit, and then you have your savings account, both of which are considered cash. Aside from those, we just discussed two other concepts. So please, please, please be a master at bank overdrafts. Understand na if you have a bank overdraft, that would mean na in one of your accounts, meron kang negative amount. And because that's a negative, generally, we record that as a current liability. Generally, a bank overdraft is a current liability. However, what is our exception to that rule? If in the same bank, you have a different account na may positive balance, that's the only time you can offset your bank overdraft so that meron kang net cash. So again, scenario 1, meron akong negative 10,000 sa BPI account ko. And then I have a BDO account na 20,000. Generally, the bank overdraft of 10,000 is a current liability. Hindi ko siya pwedeng i-offset because different banks. BPI, BDO. So I have a 10,000 current liability for my BPI account and a 20,000 BDO account in cash. Pero what if I have a BPI account na negative 10,000 and then I have a second BPI account that has a 20,000 account? That will fall under the exception. That's the only time I can offset the 20,000 with the minus 10,000 overdraft. So in my financial presentation, my cash in bank in BPI would be net of overdraft of 10,000, right? So if you want a more illustrative case, kindly refer back to our session last week. Second, we also have a compensating balance. So what is compensating balance? It is the minimum required deposit. So ang tatanungin nyo lang sa sarili nyo sa compensating balance is it legally restricted? If yes, if it is legally restricted, then it's a current asset or a non-current asset, but it's not cash. Okay? So again, cash should be free of use. So if there's restrictions, that's not cash. Therefore, if it's not legally restricted, then that's cash. So wag malito, all these four are overview of concepts related to cash in bank. But strictly speaking, when you talk about cash in bank, there are three kinds of deposits. So I already discussed the two. So we have your checking account that is non-interest bearing. It is evidenced by your deposit slip. So ang itsura ng checking account mo, kapag gusto mo mag-transact, mag-fill out ka ng deposit slip, magbibigay ka ng pera alongside this paper, and then tataas yung checking account mo. The difference between checking account and savings account is that savings account is interest bearing and it's evidenced by a passbook. So if you're a BPI holder, I'm sure you've seen yung mga ganitong booklet na every time you withdraw, every time you deposit, they're gonna be asking you for your passbook, tapos isa-stamp nila or ipiprintan nila. And then you'll see your balance, right? And then aside from these two, we have time deposits. So now, yung time deposit, we already included this in our discussion sa cash equivalent. Pero kindly note na time deposits are usually related to your cash in bank. So same with the savings account, it's interest bearing, but it's not evidenced by a passbook, but it's evidenced by a certificate of deposit. So wag malito, we had four theories relating on whether you can classify things as cash or cash equivalent. But in types of deposits, there are three. Checking account, savings account, which is considered as cash. And then you have your time deposit na if it fulfills the requirement, it would be cash equivalent. So now, when we do bank recon, we only talk about checking accounts. Okay? So there's three deposit accounts, but in bank reconciliation, we're primarily talking about checking accounts. Okay? So now, the question is, how can we master bank recon? And this is gonna be the overview of our lesson today. But before I discuss this, are there any questions regarding the overview? Kindly let me know if there are any questions in the chat. If not, I will proceed. So clear. Again, bank reconciliation only deals with checking accounts, right? So now, how can we best master bank recon? The first thing that I want you to understand is our book to bank relationship. From there, I will talk about the bank reconciliation, particularly the adjusted balance method. And then we're gonna be taking a deep dive into the book balance, the bank statement, and what are the reconciling items related to each. So kindly take note, there are other methods to do bank recon, but my main method would be the adjusted balance method. Because once you master the adjusted balance method, the other methods naman are just reformatting, right? So, ang focus natin today, ang gusto kong i-master nyo, is this thing called adjusted balance method. If you walk out of here today, na you can do the adjusted balance method by hand, without any parang looking at the format, etc., etc., then today's session would be a success. Now again, I haven't seen the quiz, I haven't seen the exam, but based on how cash is usually discussed, ang pinakamabigat, ang pinakamapagpamatay would be bank recon. So if you get high in bank recon plus theory, you'll most likely pass the quiz, right? So please master bank recon para tong cost flows of inventory. So now, let's first understand what do you mean by reconciliation? So reconciliation means that merong hindi nagtutugma, right? There is this unbalance, right? So ang nire-reconcile sa bank reconciliation is your cash per book and your cash per bank. So magkaiba yung balance mo usually sa cash per book and yung sa cash per bank. But before taking a deep dive into bank reconciliation, let's first understand what's the relationship ba between our book and the bank, right? And the first thing that I want to highlight is that in terms of the principles, your cash in bank per book should be equal to the cash per bank. What do I mean by this? So, di ba nag-account ka? When you're an accountant, you keep a ledger. In the ledger, you'll have different balances. You'll have a balance for cash on hand. You'll have a balance for cash fund. And then, definitely, you'll have a balance in cash in bank. Now, the thing is, your cash in bank account, yung particular account na yun, based on your book, so shortened as cash per book, should always equal your cash per bank. So if I have a cash in bank BPI account on my book stated at 100,000, dapat na when I look at the bank statement of the cash per bank, dapat 100,000 yun. Whatever I have recorded on my books should be accurately represented on my bank statement, right? Ideally. But in the real world, we'll see that it's not how it usually works because of timing differences. But conceptually, and the goal of bank reconciliation is to prove that your cash per book should be equal to your cash per bank. Because at the end of the day, your cash per book and your cash per bank are what we call reciprocal accounts. So what do we mean by this? Let's take a fundamental transaction when it comes to your relationship with your bank. So what are the transactions na we usually associate when it comes to banks? Number one, deposit. So let's say for Company X collected 100,000 from a customer in a settlement of an account. So nakakuha tayo ng pera, but that money we deposited to Union Bank, our bank account. So we have two balances. We have our cash per book and we have our cash per bank. So when we record this, I hope naman na we already know how to record in our cash per book. Of 100,000, we'll have a journal entry of cash in bank, parenthesis, Union Bank, so that we can identify kung saan natin ilalagay. 100,000. Credit, accounts receivable, 100,000. So nabawasan yung accounts receivable natin kasi na-collect na natin, right? And therefore, our cash per book would be plus 100,000. So currently, our cash per book is 100,000. Now, dineposit natin. Now, huwag kayong malito. The journal entry I will show you is the journal entry created by the bank. This is not created by the entity. This is created by the bank. So how would the bank record the transaction? So the bank will create a journal entry, debit cash, kasi naka-receive sila ng cash from us, but credit Company X account. Now, in the view of the bank, company X account, ang ibig sabihin nun, tumaas yung account natin by 100,000. Right? But, since hindi naman pera ng bangko yun, they'll treat it as a liability. That this 100,000 that nag-increase nga ng 100,000 yung laman ng bank in general, but that 100,000 belongs to us. So, this is a payable for them. So, in our cash per bank, based on our company X account for Union Bank, nadagdagan rin tayo ng 100,000. So as you can see, the relationship with your book to bank is our company debited cash in bank, but the bank credited our account. Debit cash in bank, Union Bank in our book journal entry, but on the books of the bank, they credited our account of company X 100,000. So the reason why I'm highlighting this is that usually before bank recon, our concept with cash is kapag debit ang cash, it will increase. Pag credit si cash, it will decrease. That is still true when it comes to accounting. But in the perspective of the bank, I'm just showing you na baliktad sila. When they say they credited our account, that would increase our account by 100,000. And then when they say they debited an account, bumababa yung account natin. So take note, baliktad from the point of view of the bank. So if you see a bank credit in your cash, that would be an increase in your total cash account in that bank. If it's a bank debit, it will be a decrease. Baliktad siya when it comes to what we're used to in accounting. Issuing the check, company X issued check for 30,000. So how do we write this in our books? So on the left, ito yung journal entry na gagawin ni company X. Then accounts payable, 30,000, credit, 30,000 cash in bank, Union Bank, right? So bumaba yung accounts payable natin and bumaba yung cash kasi nag-issue tayo ng check. So may 30,000 yung cash per book natin. Now, in the cash per bank, what will happen will be the company will debit company X account, meaning yung utang nila sa atin from 100,000 bababa ng 30,000. And then bababa rin yung number of cash nila in the bank at 30,000. So nabawasan rin yung account natin ng 30,000. So again, to summarize, when it comes to issuing checks, our company credited cash as situated in the cash in bank Union Bank, but the bank debited our account. So baliktad kay bank. So a bank debit decreases your cash per bank. A bank credit increases. So please understand na baliktad yung perception kay bank. So if we were to summarize what happened, we started with a zero beginning cash per book and a zero balance of cash per bank. And then when you have a deposit, you have a book debit and a bank credit. So an increase in cash, it's a book debit, it's a bank credit. When you issue the check, it decreases your cash. It's a book credit, it's a bank debit. And then it will give you your ending cash per book at 70,000 and ending cash per bank at 70,000. So, nag-balance, right? So, this is the meaning of reciprocal accounts. That for any, when one account is debited, the other is credited. So, when we deposit, we will debit in our books, but that will be a credit in the bank. When we issue checks or any decreases of cash, that would be credit in our books, but a debit in cash. And ultimately, that's how we can maintain the balance of our cash per book should all to our cash per bank. Are there any questions or clear naman so far na pag si bank baliktad yung perspective? Kindly thumbs up if everything is clear. Feel free to chat also if you have any questions. Okay, so we're clear. So medyo clear na yung goal natin. in bank reconciliation, we want our cash per book to be equal to our cash per bank. Now, let's dive into our bank recon. So what is bank recon? Basically, bank recon, like what I've mentioned, is the process of reconciling your cash book balance and bank balance. So the question is, bakit ba nagkakaroon ng difference? One, there usually are time lags that prevent one party from recording the transaction in the same period. So, badly put, on your book account, merong mga items na na-record sa book pero hindi na-record ni bank, or vice versa. May na-record si bank pero hindi na-record kay book. Kaya nagkakaroon ng imbalance when it comes to your cash per book and your cash per bank. Another would be that there are errors by either party in terms of recording transaction. So some theory when it comes to bank recon, the possibility of fraud is the reason why it's super important to do periodic reconciliation. And that whoever, so the question is, who will make the bank recon? It should be performed by an employee with no other responsibilities related to cash. So, for example, ako yung tagahawak ng cash or ako yung nagbibigay sa cash. Hindi dapat ako yung gagawa ng bank recon. It should be someone totally independent. I don't have any interest, I don't have any custody of the cash, I don't have any responsibility to cash. My only job should be to reconcile. Tama ba si cash per book? And is it equal to our cash per bank, right? So simply put, bank reconciliation is a statement which brings together that your cash per book is equal to your cash per bank. Usually, the bank recon is prepared monthly. So now, the question is, why is it prepared monthly? Because bank statements are released monthly. So meron kang ledger account, and then every month, may papasok na bank statement. Now, in bank recon, titingnan mo si ledger account, titingnan mo si bank statement, and then usually hindi yan magbabalance because of time lags and because of errors. Now, you will create a bank recon statement in order to make sure na mag-equal sila, right? So yan. So now, in terms of the methods, there are 3 methods, but I will only focus on the adjusted balance method, wherein you will adjusted book balance to the correct adjusted cash balance, and then you'll also bring in the unadjusted bank balance to the adjusted balance. The others we'll try to discuss, but I will leave it up to you to figure out ano yung book to bank and bank to book. I'll try to discuss this next week if we have, on Thursday if we have time, but my focus is I want you to master adjusted balance method. So usually, ang tanong dito sa bank recon is, so which one tells balance for cash? Is it si cash per book or is it si cash per bank? Usually yun yung tanong ng mga tao. Like, sino ba susundan natin? Sino yung mas tama? Si cash per book or si cash per bank? Now, ang hirap pag-usapan nito in theory. So, in the first part, I will share with you our case study for today, which would be all about Company X. And then I will show you their cash ledger. And then I will also show you their bank statement. Okay. So let's look first in the cash per book. So when you say cash per book, this is a sample cash per Company X. This is basically T account, right? Wherein si Company X has a 0 normal balance, and then from January 5 to January 31, they had some deposits and check disbursements. So pag deposit, that's debit cash, so it will increase your account balance. And then if you have your check disbursements, you will have decreases in cash. So kindly take note na per disbursement, merong accompanying date and may accompanying check number. And then usually, kapag nabigyan kayo ng checkbook, may mga numbers yun na sunod-sunod. So as you can see, per date, 721, 722, 723, 724, 725, 726. So super important na you look at the numbers of the checks, and then ano yung corresponding amount, right? So this is a simple T account, right? Wherein if you add your debits, you will have a subtotal debit of 150,000. If you add all the check disbursements that you created for the year, it will be 100,000 subtotal credits. So your unadjusted balance would be 50,000. So every time tinatanong sa inyo, ano ba yung unadjusted cash per book? Ang una nyong titingnan is the general ledger or your T account. Whatever is the balance, that would be your unadjusted cash per book at 50,000. Now, so kindly take note, ito yung mga deposit, ito yung mga check disbursements. Usually, yun lang naman yung lalabas sa general ledger. Typically. But we'll try to see if mayroon pang ibang accounts. Now, the bank statement is a bit different. The format of, heads up na, mahirapan kayo sa bank recon because how they present the book ledger and the bank statement will be different per exercise or even per question. So what's important is you understand the structure of what a bank statement is. So kahit ibahin yung format, you'll be able to follow the logic between the bank statement. So if you're good at analyzing, what I suggest is for you to just take the time to analyze what are the important parts. Now, if you're like me, na hirap kayong mag-analyze, the answer to this would be just do a lot of exercises. Every time you do a new exercise, you'll probably encounter a new way that the question will present you a bank statement. So, ipunin niyo lahat ng formats para alam niyo kung paano intindihin. So again, if you're good at analysis, take the time to analyze what are the important parts. But if you're like me, na hindi you don't have confidence in analyzing, the only way you can answer this is you answer a lot of exercises. So don't worry, I provided more exercises for us para maraming ano. So basically, a cash per bank statement would be, it will provide the dates in chronological order. So from Jan 6 to Jan 30. It will identify what are the check numbers involved, what are the withdrawals, or basically decreases in your cash, what are the deposits or what are the increases in your cash in bank, and then what are the balance. So in January 6, you had the deposit of 60,000. So you had the balance of 60,000 on January 6. In January 8, nagkaroon ka ng withdrawal represented by a check. So this is a check disbursement. So 60 minus 5,000 is 55,000. In January 11, nagkaroon ka ulit ng check disbursement of 10,000. Jan 12, check disbursement of 18,000. So 55 minus 10, naging 45. January 12 balance therefore is 27,000 kasi 45 minus 18, right? And then you'll have other deposits. Now, itong mga deposits and yung mga withdrawals, it is not limited to deposits meaning nagbigay ka ng cash kay bank or withdrawals meaning nag-issue ka ng check. There are what we call credit memos and debit memos. So, the ones here, yung may nakalagay the debit memos, again, baliktad kay bank. A debit memo for bank is a decrease in your cash. So, pag mayroong ganito, walang check number, tapos may mga withdrawals. These are debit memos, right? So either return check or a service charge. So these are not checks na you issued. These are just decreases in your cash because of any bank-related transaction. So these are debit memos. Ito, it says CM, that's credit memo. So hindi ibig sabihin nito nagbigay ka ng 15,000 sa bangko kaya tumaas yung deposit. It's a credit memo, it probably, meron kayang note collection na nag-increase na bank statement mo. Right? So, day to day, they maintain the balance. So, titingnan mo lang kung ano yung balance ng January 30. It's 84,000. So, the adjusted bank balance is 84,000. So, pag tinanong kayo, what is the unadjusted cash per bank? You only look at the balance of January 31 for your cash in bank. So now, balance for cash? Is it the cash per book that tells us 50,000 yung cash natin? Or is it the cash per bank that it says 84,000? The correct answer here is that neither is correct. Neither is correct. The 50,000 is incorrect. The 84,000 is incorrect. So how do we get the right balance? By using what we call the adjusted balance method. So right now, hindi nag-equate si cash per book natin and si cash per bank. This one in the example is 50,000. This one in the example is 84,000. So what we need to do is first adjust natin si cash per book with what we call book reconciling items. So ano bang ibig sabihin ng book reconciling items? These are items na hindi na take into account when you were creating your cash per book, and therefore you need to adjust these in order to arrive with your correct cash balance. So with your 50,000, kailangan mo pang i-take into account si bank credit memo, bank debit memo, and any book errors na you identify in order to arrive with your correct cash balance. Same with the cash per bank. You need to adjust by bank reconciling items, which are typically your DIT or your deposits in transit, your outstanding checks, and any bank errors. So, by adjusting your cash per bank, you will have a correct cash balance. And that's the only time mag-equal si cash per book and si cash per bank. So, yung unadjusted cash per book, these are all not the true value of your cash. You first need to adjust them accordingly to arrive with the correct cash balance. Right? Are there any questions so far? If kindly feel free to message na lang sa chat. But now, I will first start with book balance. So, in your book balance, we're currently at an adjusted cash per book of 50,000. Now again, this 50,000 is wrong because there are some transactions unknown to the bookkeeper that you can only find when you receive the bank statement or when errors are discovered. For our first case study, I will ignore wala mo ng book errors, wala mo ng bank errors. I want you to first understand how can we adjust the cash per book with what we call the book reconciling items. So may tatlong parts yan: bank credit memo, bank debit memo, and book error. So, adjusting your cash, you look at your bank statement. Ano ba yung meron sa bank statement na wala sa books ko? Right? So, let's first look at our bank credit memos. So, what is a bank credit memo? A bank credit memo are items credited by the bank. So, when we say credited, we're talking about deposits that are not deposits and are not yet recorded in books. Refresher to what I mentioned. Nakalagay dito deposits. But if it has an annotation called CMNC, that means it's a credit memo. So we're particularly talking about the 15,000 here. So how do we prove this? We first look at what's already in our books. Meron tayong deposit na 60,000. That probably came from the 60,000 na we had in our book. So, may 60,000 tayo kay book, meron tayong 60,000 kay bank. So, okay. Yung 20,000, meron rin tayo niyan sa book. Meron yan sa book. Now, itong 15,000, wala to sa book natin. Therefore, hindi siya na-account in the 50,000. So we need to include this credit memo in the book. So for those na magsasabi, paano po yung 40,000? The 40,000 is present in the book, but it's not present in the bank. That's for bank reconciling items. Right now, we're focusing on book reconciling items. So again, we're focusing lang on credit memos. And a credit memo, again, are items credited by the bank that are not deposits and are not yet recorded in the books. So this is not a deposit because it's a credit memo. It's not yet recorded in the books because as you can see, it's not in our T-balance. Walang 15,000 here. So therefore, the general rule is you add bank credit memos. So if you see notes receivable collected, proceeds of bank loan, matured time deposits, all of those are examples of credit memos. So what you do is with your unadjusted cash balance, you add bank credit memos because bank credit memos increase your cash account. So going back, the only bank credit memo here is the 15,000. So we had an unadjusted book balance of 50,000. And then the second step is add bank credit memo represented by NC. Ano yung NC? It says CMNC. NC is probably the bank was able to collect a note on your behalf na it gave you 15,000 extra money. So it's not a deposit, but another transaction. So it's 50,000 plus 15,000. So right now, nasa 65,000 na yung bank account natin. So we're clear with bank credit. So bank debit memos naman, baliktad. We're talking about debit, charge, or withdrawals. But again, similarly with bank credit memos, bank debit memos are not check disbursements. So we're not talking about this 721 check, this 722 check, this 723 check, and this 724 check. Because as you can see, these are already reflected in our cash account. Itong 5,000 nandito na sa credit. Itong 10,000 nandito na. Yung 18,000 nandito na. Yung 2,000 nandito na. Ano yung wala dun sa credit natin sa cash? Yung wala is our DM or debit memo and your DM debit memo for service charge. Therefore, itong 5,000 and 1,000 are what we call bank debit memos. These are items or charge debited by the bank that are not check disbursements and are not yet recorded in the books. Right? It's not yet recorded in the books. Wala pang 5,000 sa credit natin, wala pang 1,000 sa credit natin. Therefore, the general rule for bank debit memos is you deduct bank debit memos. So what are examples of debit memos? NSF. So again, please go back to our cash theory. NSF means the check bounced. Meaning nag-issue ka ng check na not sufficient yung fund. Synonyms of NSF would be DAIF and DAUT. DC, meaning defective checks. What are examples of defective checks? Nag-issue ka ng check, hindi mo pinirmahan. May check pero may punit. So pag yun, hindi yun a-accept ng bank. So they will issue a bank debit memo regarding DC. Syempre, the bank does not provide its services for free. So usually, it will have a bank service charge. And then sometimes you will also have reduction of loans that will lower your cash balance in the bank. So again, NSF, DC, bank service charge, and reduction of loans are just examples of your debit memo. But generally, you deduct bank debit memos. Debit memos is 5,000 na return check and then 1,000 na service charge. So after adding our bank credit memos, we subtract our bank debit memos. So represented by an NSF check worth 5,000 and a bank service charge of 1,000. So 5,000 NSF check, bank service charge. The last would be book errors. Again, in the example, wala. And ito yung mahirap actually. Sa book error, make sure that the error is on the recording of the books. Ang may mali, si General Ledger. So for example, there's a correct cash deposit of 10,000. Now, in the book, you only recorded that as 1,000. Na ang tama talaga is 10,000. You have an understated cash receipt. understated cash receipt. Therefore, our cash per book is plus 9,000 kasi we only recorded it as 1,000 when it should have been 10,000. So 10,000 minus 1,000, we should increase our book account by 9,000. Second scenario, what if yung 10,000 na bank deposit, naka-record pala sa books natin as 100,000. So again, this is wrong. Ang correct cash deposit raw is 10,000. Therefore, our cash per book should be subtracted by 90,000. So again, for book errors, you have to analyze what should be and what is so that you know the adjustment. So ito, 1,000, it's understated, so plus 9,000. And then ito, it's overstated, so we have to subtract cash per book by 90,000. Okay, another scenario for book errors. Let's say na ang tamang balance ng check disbursement should be 20,000, meaning you paid 20,000. Now, in your books, you had an overstated cash disbursement na yung 20,000, you recorded it as 40,000 instead. So meaning, nag-subtract ka ng 40,000 when in fact, you should have only subtracted 20,000. Therefore, your cash per book should increase by 20,000 kasi you shouldn't have subtracted by 40,000. You should have only subtracted by 20,000. Therefore, 20,000 yung kailangan mong increase, right? Second scenario, if you have understated cash disbursement, so you recorded the disbursement instead of 20,000, 2,000. So, nag-subtract ka lang ng 2,000 when in fact, you should have subtracted 20,000. So, you need to further subtract 18,000. So, for book errors, this is like correcting entries lang, but please make sure na you know kung sino nagkamali. Is it a book error or is it a bank error? So, the example will be explicit on who made the mistake, and there are certain assumptions that I will discuss in the second example that we'll be discussing. But for now, to simplify, for the company X scenario, there are no errors. So therefore, we don't need to adjust for book errors. We can arrive with our correct cash balance of 59,000. So again, what do you need to do to adjust your cash account? You start with your unadjusted book of 50,000 and then add bank credit memos, 15,000. Subtract debit memos, so minus 5,000, which is represented by an NSF check that bounced, minus 1,000, represented by a bank service charge. So 59,000 kasi there's no book errors. So the correct cash balance is 59,000 after recording or recognizing our book reconciling items. So in summary, in the adjusted method, you first get your cash per book, you add your bank credit memos, you subtract bank debit memos, you add or subtract book errors depending on the analysis, so that you'll arrive with your correct cash balance. So these are just some examples of credit memos, these are some examples of debit memos. Please familiarize yourself with them. Hindi sometimes magiging explicit si problem whether it's a credit or a debit memo. It's up to your analysis whether it will increase your cash and therefore it's a credit memo, or it will decrease your cash. It's gonna be a bank debit memo. So this is just the table format. So step 1, balance per book, add bank credit memo. So these are just some of the examples. So 15,000. Less bank debit memos. So these are just some examples. 6,000 and then book errors to arrive with your book balance of 59. So without even solving for our bank balance, our gut feel is that the cash per bank balance should be equal to 59,000. Okay? So that ends book balance. Are there any questions before I proceed to bank? So same lang yung exercise natin kay bank, pero may ibang concepts lang. Are there any questions? I hope it's clear. Kindly thumbs up if there are no questions when it comes to bank side muna. Ay, sa book side muna. So again, there are book reconciling items, right? Bank credit memos, you add. Subtract bank debit memos, and then you adjust for book errors. This is just a sample table, right? Applying this concept. So now we go to bank balance. So similarly, tapos na tayo on one part. We know na yung cash per book, you add bank credit memos, subtract bank debit memos, and then you adjust for book errors. Now, let's now focus on the bank reconciling items. So again, your cash per bank is usually wrong because of clearing days. So meaning, there are some deposits and check disbursements that have been made in the books but are not yet reflected in the bank. So for example, nag-deposit ako ng January 31. So sa bank statement, sinend rin nila sa akin ng January 31. So naka-print na yun. Meaning, hindi na pumasok yung deposit ko. But in fact, naka-deposit naman na ako by then. Hindi lang nakikita sa bank statement. Or pare, nag-issue ako ng check. Yung check na yun, that should subtract from my bank statement. But since the print na nila, it's not reflected in the bank statement. So these are examples of bank reconciling items. You'll have your deposits in transit and your outstanding checks, and then other bank errors. So again, in this scenario, I won't talk about bank errors. So again, deposits in transit. Again, let's look at the bank statement. So deposits in transit are collections or receipts that are already recorded in the books but are not yet reflected in the bank. So deposits in transit, naka-record na sa book pero wala pa kay bank. So let's look at the deposits. Yung 60,000, naka-record na. Yung 20,000, naka-record na. Yung 30,000, naka-record na. Itong credit memo, it's already reflected in your bank, and this is pertaining to a book reconciling item. But now, we're focusing on a bank reconciling item, which is deposit in transit. And therefore, our deposit in transit is this 40,000. Meaning, dineposit ko na tong 40,000 na to na dapat pumasok sa bank statement pero hindi na print on time. Because as you can see, January 31 ko siya dineposit. And then yung bank statement, naka-issue siya January 30. So, for January, this 40,000 should have been reflected in the bank statement. So, we have to adjust the bank. Naka-record siya sa book pero hindi siya naka-record sa bank. Therefore, we add deposits in transit. So, your deposits in transit represent month-end collections forwarded to bank but does not appear in the bank statement, or undeposited collection, so basically cash on hand awaiting delivery to the bank for deposit. So your cash on bank, you add your deposits in transit. So again, looking back in the example, we look at our book. Ito raw yung apat na dineposit natin. These deposits have already been reflected in the bank. 60,000, 60,000, 20,000, 20,000, 30,000, 30,000. But this deposit of 40,000 is in transit. Na it should have been reflected here, but because it's in transit, hindi siya lumabas in the bank statement. Therefore, we have to add 40,000 to our 84,000. So basically, we have our so coming from here, we know that there's a deposit in transit of 40,000. So with our unadjusted bank account of 84,000, we add our deposit in transit of 40,000. So this is the Jan 31 collection that's not in the bank statement, right? Next, the next thing that we need to look for is net outstanding checks. So if kanina sa deposit in transits, we look at the deposit, for net outstanding checks, we now look at withdrawals. So what is the meaning of net outstanding checks? These are checks already recorded in the book, but not yet reflected on the bank statement. So if we have to analyze, we just look at the check numbers. Si 721 is already recorded in the bank. Si 722 already recorded. Si 723, the check number, is already recorded in the bank. Si 724 is already recorded in the bank. But check 725, check 726 represented by 37,000 and 28,000 are checks na we issued but are not yet reflected on the bank. Right? And therefore, our net outstanding checks, we should deduct from 84,000, the 37,000, and the 28,000 outstanding check. Kasi that should have been subtractions from our cash in the bank statement. Hindi lang siya nag-reflect because of a time lag. So, we deduct net outstanding checks. So, why do I say net outstanding checks? Be careful. You already know the definition of an outstanding check. It's a check that we already recorded in the books but not yet reflected in the bank statement. But be careful. If ang nakalagay, the outstanding check is certified, ang ibig sabihin nun, the bank already took into account yung sufficiency of the funds and then binawasan na nila yung cash in bank mo. Therefore, pare, my outstanding check is worth 100,000. And then out of this 100,000 outstanding check, there's a certified check worth 20,000. My net outstanding check would be 80,000. So if I had to deduct my NOC, that would be minus 80,000, not minus 100,000. So be careful, it's net outstanding checks. Kaya NOC. So again, deduct NOC. So looking at this example again, we look at the checks now, we're already in our books. And then check 725 and check 726 is not present in the bank statement. And therefore, 37 plus 28 will represent our 65,000 worth of outstanding checks. So add DIT of 40,000, subtract net outstanding checks. So my NOC check tayo of 37,000, represented by check number 725, and net outstanding check of 28,000 represented by check number 726. So adjust for bank errors. So sometimes you'll have erroneous bank debits. So for example, I'm company X, pero si company Y nag-issue ng check. So dapat ang babawasan si company Y, pero nagkamali si bank. Ang binawasan niya, ako, ng 10,000. So therefore, mali, hindi niya ako dapat bawasan ng 10,000, ang dapat niyang bawasan si company Y. So if you have an erroneous bank debit, your cash per bank should be increased by 10,000. Similarly, if you have erroneous bank credit, so si company Y, nag-collect ng check worth 10,000. Dapat siya yung kumita, pero na-credit sa atin ni bank. Eh, hindi naman sa atin yun. Therefore, our cash per bank should be subtracted by 10,000. But for simplicity, let's assume that there are no errors. Therefore, we can complete our bank recon on the bank side. So 84,000 unadjusted bank plus DIT of 40,000 minus outstanding checks of 37,000 represented by check number 725 and 28,000. You'll have a correct cash balance of 59,000. So again, this is the format. Cash per bank plus DIT minus NOC plus or minus bank errors will give you your correct cash balance. So this is the table format for your bank recon on the bank side. 84,000 plus DIT of 40,000 minus outstanding check of 27 and 38 will give you your balance per book of 59,000. So now, again, parehong mali si unadjusted cash per book, parehong mali si unadjusted cash per bank. Now, si cash per book, we have to adjust using book reconciling items. So si cash per book plus bank credit memos minus bank debit memos will give you your correct cash balance. And then si cash per bank, ang bank reconciling items is si DIT, si NOC, and si bank errors. Please master this. Itong DIT will never affect your cash per book. Itong NOC will never affect your cash per book. Itong bank credit memos won't affect your cash per bank. Your bank debit memos won't affect your cash per bank. So they're completely separate. So first, you have to know to categorize. Is it a bank credit memo? Is it a DIT? Etc. etc. Right? So You have to be careful on figuring it out. So, ito. And then in the example, as you can see, the cash per book is 50,000. The cash per bank unadjusted was 84,000. By adjusting with our bank credit memos or bank debit memos, we arrive with the correct cash balance of 59,000. And by adjusting with our DIT in our net outstanding checks, we were able to get 59,000. And that's how you reconcile with the bank. So this is just a summary of steps. And then what are the things na where it affects. So it's already found in the PowerPoint in the Google Drive. Are there any questions? I will proceed na to a more complicated problem. So dadamihan ko lang exercises so that paulit-ulit lang sa inyo yung process. Are there any questions before I proceed? Kindly thumbs up if we can proceed to the next exercise. So actually, our sample scenario was pretty easy. Madaling hanapin si credit memo, madaling hanapin si debit memo, madaling hanapin si deposit in transit. Now, sa bank recon, ang mangyayari kasi is lulunurin kayo ng information. The key to doing well is be organized. Tackle it one step at a time. So, you can devise ways of actually tackling how you answer problems. But I'll share with you how I usually tackle like a hard problem sa bank recon. So let's master. In the exam, let's say, bibigyan kayo ng ganito. And then at the start, parang maiyak ka, right? Because like this is a format that we're not used to. But keep calm and then try to understand. So first, separation. I will identify ano ba yung cash per book ko. My cash per book will be represented by my general ledger, and then my bank statement will represent my cash per bank. So that's step 1. Huwag ako malulunod sa information. I just identify, ito yung cash per book, ito yung cash per bank. Second, I will go back to the master formula. I will go back to the master formula, which is ito. How to adjust cash per book, how to adjust cash per bank. And then I will do it one step at a time. So step 1. I want to get muna the beginning bank and book balances. So roughly, ganito yung itsura ng solution sheet ko. I'll already write cash per book. And then I'll have a space so that I can look at ano yung mga bank credit memos na I have to add, bank debit memos na I have to subtract, book errors, and then DIT and OC bank errors. So ito yung format ko. So now, I will first look at ano ba yung cash per bank ko. So step 1, point A, I look at the bank statement. So there are 2 ways to solve for your unadjusted cash per bank. One is by observation. You just look at January 31, and then ito yung balance niya. So, my cash per bank easily is 277,000. So, I haven't seen the quiz, pero let's say, what if hindi binigay sa inyo tong mga balances na to? What are other ways for you to solve for cash per bank? Another way for you to solve for cash per bank is you look at your beginning balance on February 28. So your March 1 balance is 125,000. And then you look at your debits and credits. But be careful. Sa bank, baliktad. A bank debit is a subtraction and a bank credit is an addition. As you can see, the deposit is credited, while issuing a check is a debit. So therefore, 125 minus the total debits of 25,000 plus 177 is equal to 277,000. So regardless of the method, I know that my unadjusted cash per bank is 277,000. Next, alam ko na si cash per bank. That's 1 point. Let's look for cash per book. So si cash per book, ang titingnan ko si general ledger. Since pareho sila ng format, I'll just look at the March 30 ending balance. So roughly, I can say na the cash per book unadjusted is 285,120. Pero again, what are other ways to solve? You look at the beginning balance in your ledger, 178,500. Now, ito na yung nakasanayan natin. Debits represent increases in cash. So as you can see, the deposit, debit yan. While issuing a check is a credit. So therefore, 178,500 plus 144,000 minus 38,000, 28,285,120. So we're done. So may 2 points na tayo. We have cash per book, cash per bank. Step 2. I want you to be aware na there are previous month outstanding checks and previous month deposit in transit. Taking a look at our month, we're looking at the month of March. Now, we have to take away the February outstanding check and we have to take away the February deposits in transit. So how do we do this? First is that you look at the beginning balance of the bank and the beginning balance of the book. Clearly, magkaiba sila. And the reason why magkaiba sila is that there are deposits in transits and outstanding checks that affect your cash per book and your cash per bank. So we have to make sense of the difference. So a tip to find previous DIT, look at the early deposits that are in the bank but not in the book. And then to get the previous OC, look for a check number in the bank that's not in the book. So how do we apply? Step 2, we have to ignore the previous month DIT and OC. So again, this is a March bank reconciliation. We want to take away the February DIT and the February outstanding check. So the very first thing I look at is that yung cash per balance ko is 178,000 and hindi siya equal sa 125,000. So maghanap tayo ng DIT. Let's look for a deposit. So ito, an early deposit that are in the bank but not in the book. This is an early deposit. March 1 pumasok, 56,000. Now, we look at the deposits. May 56,000 ba kayo cash? Or 620, 68, 72? Wala. Nakay bank, pero wala si book. Therefore, I can say that this is a previous month deposit in transit. Next, I look at the check numbers. 23532 to 23538. And then may weird. Bakit may 23531? 23532 yung pinakaunang check na in-issue ko nung March 1. So itong 23531, which is before 23532, is probably a previous month outstanding check. Na itong deposit na to and yung check na to nasa previous month cash accounting na ngayon lang nag-reflect kay bank. And therefore, using the balance of the bank, 125,000 plus 56,000 deposit in transit minus the 2.5 outstanding check, nagbalance. When I take into account the 125,000 plus 56 minus 2.5, nagbalance siya to 178,500. And therefore, I can be confident na this March 1 deposit is a previous month or the February deposit in transit. And this check 23531 is a previous month outstanding check. Okay? So again, paano mo hahanapin yung previous month? Sa checks, madali. You look at the pinakaunang check na binigay niya. 23532. Since ito, before ng 23532 kasi 23531, this is a previous month outstanding check. Sa deposit, first clue, maaga siya na deposit. Second clue, yung 56,000, I can't find it here in my cash deposits, in my book. And therefore, this is a previous month deposit. So again, step 2, we ignore previous month deposit in transit. We ignore previous month outstanding check. Any questions? Yun. So please, balikan nyo na lang to if confused pa kayo. Right? So step 3, let's start with the deposits. So let's find what's in the book that's not in the bank. And then after that, let's find what's in the bank that's not in the book. Since we're talking about deposits, my first gut feel would be, okay, gusto ko kunin yung DIP ko. So how do you get your deposits in transit? First step, you look at the general cash ledger, you trace each deposit. So itong deposit na to, kailangan na reflecto kay bank. Wait. While I'm doing the DIP analysis, meron ako napansing error. Si book 4,620 yung ni-record. Si bank, ang ni-record nila is 46,200. Or there's an error. And ano pa yung other evidence ko na these are pertaining to the same account? March 9 niya dineposit. March 10 nag-reflect. So usually it takes 1 day to clear the bank. So itong 46,200 and then 4,620 are talking about one item lang. So there's an error. Now the question is, sino nagkamali? Si bank or si book? So let's pause the DIP analysis and then let's look at sino. Let's adjust na muna for the error. So the cash according to the per book is 4,620, while the cash per bank is 46,200. Now, if there is no explicit statement in the problem, we assume that the bank is correct. Kasi si bank yung nakatanggap, right? So, pag deposits, tapos magkaiba yung deposit nyo sa book, magkaiba yung deposit nyo sa bank, if walang sinabi si problem, we assume bank is correct. Therefore, this 4,620 is an example of a book error. Now, how do we adjust the book based on this book error? We do the what is what should be scenario. Again, alam ko sawang-sawa na kayo, pero pag error, it's always what is what should be error. So ano yung what is? Currently, we were able to record a deposit of 4,620. But what it should be was a deposit of 46,200. Therefore, my adjustment should be 46,200 minus 4,620. 41,580. So I have to increase sa book 41,580. Kasi hindi siya na-record. So, ito yung dalawang alam ko, and then magkakaroon ako ng bagong entry in my solution. Plus 41,580 represented by a book error. So, again, because it should have been recorded as 46,200. So, meron na akong 3 points. I was able to identify the 41,580. So again, now that we're clear with the bank error, we can proceed with the DIP analysis. So, alam na natin to. So technically, nag-reflect siya, right? Nag-reflect yung deposit na to sa bank statement. So hindi yan DIP. Yung 68,000 sa book, na-reflect na 68,000 sa bank. Okay. Itong 72,000, may deposit pa ba tayo sa bank? Ito, credit memo. Ito, interest. Itong deposit na to, hindi na-reflect sa bank statement. And this is a classic definition of a DIT. It's a deposit in transit. And therefore, it's in the book, but it's not in the bank, and it's a deposit, and therefore, it's a deposit in transit. So our DIT is 72,000. So 4 points. I was able to identify 72,000 deposit in transit. Next, tapusin na natin lahat ng credit sa bank. Right? So, tapos na yung debits natin or deposits natin sa book. So, wala na tong column na to, right? We already accounted this na. Pero sa credit sa bank, may dalawa pa tayo. We have a credit memo of 6,300 and a credit memo of interest. So after DIT, tatapusin ko na yung analysis for this particular column with credit memo. And what do you do with credit memo? It's a book reconciling item. plus 63 plus 500. So our total credit memo is 6,800. So for 5 points. I know that my bank credit memo is 6,800. So now, by doing that, we're halfway done. Tapos na natin lahat ng increases in the bank statement and increases sa cash ledger. Step 4 is we end with checks. So again, find what's in the book that's not in the bank and find what's in the bank that's not in the books. So currently, we have, ang wala na lang tayo, bank debit memo and net outstanding checks, right? And then pending any bank errors. So since we're talking about withdrawals, the very first thing I'll solve for or analyze is my outstanding checks. So let's look at the bank statement and trace each check. So check 23533, 5,000. Okay. Itong check na to na-reflect kay bank. Check 2335385. May 85 ba ako dito sa book? 7,000, 11,000, 8,000, 3,000. Parang wala akong 85. So now, ang ibig sabihin ba nito, this is a previous outstanding check? So pag hindi ka sure, you double check the check number. If you look at the check number is 23353. When in fact, all the checks that have been issued for the month is under 235XX. Therefore, I can hypothesize that there's an error. Why? Because lahat ng checks na nandun sa book ko is check 235. Even my previous month outstanding check started with 235 blank blank. Ito, 233. It's a 3, not a 5. The bank charged a check that's not ours. Therefore, it's a bank error. That's why it's super important that you look at your check numbers. Now, you have 23353. We adjust for bank error. So, binawasan tayo ng bank ng 85. Eh, hindi naman sa atin yung check na to eh. It's a 23353 check. That's not our check. Therefore, what is that currently, sorry. Binawasan tayo ng bank ng 85. When in fact, they shouldn't have deducted us because that's not our check. Therefore, our bank adjustment should be, kailangan nila pataasin ng 85 because that's an error. That's not a check that's attributable to us. Therefore, I pause muna the OC analysis and then naka 1 point na naman ako. I was able to find a bank error of 8,500. So right now, the only two pending na lang is my NOC analysis and my bank debit memos. So let's complete the NOC analysis. So ito, ni-read ko na to represent na this check is an error. So in the bank statement, isa na lang pala yung check na naka-reflect. Si 23535. So hanapin natin si 23535 dito. So accounted for na to. So itong mga checks na hindi naka-highlight, these are all outstanding checks. Checks that we issued pero hindi pa naka-reflect sa bank statement. Therefore, to us, the 7,000, the 11,000, the 3,300, the 1,2, and the 2,5 are all outstanding checks. So if I were to ask in the problem, how much is your outstanding check? It would be 7,000 plus 11,000 plus 3,300 plus 1,200 plus 2,500. So you'll have an outstanding check of 25,000. So another point, I was able to get my net outstanding check of 25,000. Ano na lang yung kulang? So nakompleto ko na lahat ng bank reconciling item and therefore I can now solve for another correct cash balance. 277 plus 72 minus 25 na outstanding check plus 85. So my correct cash balance is 332,500. So dapat By doing this, I can technically solve na for my bank debit memo if I did everything correctly. Kasi what I'll just do is 302. So i-plug in mo yan and then solve for x, right? But let's just do it chronologically. So now, we were able to account for all of these na. Ano na lang hindi natin na-account? This debit memo of 1,000. So, we just have minus 1,000. So, double check. 285, 120 plus 68 minus 1,000 plus 40. 332,500. Right? So, nag-balance. Our correct cash balance is equal to your correct cash balance, right? Your cash per book is equal to your cash per bank. Step 5, we journalize. So again, one thing you need to know, we only journalize adjustments to book. So ito yung analysis natin. This is our book adjustments. These are our bank adjustments. So this is another way to write it in table format. So you can refer to the PowerPoint na I already uploaded. Ganito rin yung itsura niya. And out of these two, yung book adjustments yung i-journalize natin. So how do we journalize? So first, you look at the transfer. The transfer of 6,300 is an increase, and therefore, this is a credit accounts receivable of 6,300. So nabayaran na raw yung accounts receivable because nag-transfer raw ng amount. See, yung may utang sa atin. Yung interest is an income. So interest income of 500. May check fee ka, so that would be an expense called bank charge expense. And then your book error deposit, ito yung mahirap. Yung 41,580. Saan to nang galing? Ito yung, dapat yung total deposits mo sa bank, 46,200. Pero ang na-record mo lang is 4,620. Meaning, nasa napunta yung 41,580? Nasa cash on hand mo pa lang. Therefore, you credit cash on hand of 41,580. So that, in total, your total increase would be 47,380. Right? Wherein, itong 47,380 is just 285,120 plus 47,380 would be equal to your 332,500. So that's how you journalize. So actually, that formally ends bank recon. Pero like what I promised, so it's a deep dive. So the first part, so some parting tips. So the first part is theory. I just want you to understand what DIT, what OC, what debit memos are, credit memos. The second problem is expect na mas mahirap or same level of difficulty yung lalabas sa quiz and sa exam. So please master, please fully understand what are the analysis na we did. Paulit-ulit nyo, right? And then, I also prepared some items. So marami nagtatanong sa akin. So parang yung mga, based on my consultations, the usual problem would be, number one, na-overwhelm raw. Parang nahihirapan sa analysis during exam. Number two, nakakapagod raw. Sagutan yung mga items, which are all valid, right? So, to those people, I sympathize. Like, I super can imagine na how stressful it is. Pero the only thing na paulit-ulit kong sinasabi sa lahat is, I asked them, in terms of the amount of time na you study, which resource material works for you? Some people, Waygan yung gusto. Some people, since wala silang oras and mas straightforward si Valex yung gusto, right? Again, based on the department recommendation, ideally Waygan. Pero, I'm not gonna parang tell you to follow whatever. Do what worked best for you. So now, in terms of class standing, if si Waygan yung resource material nyo and then parang nahihirapan kayo to catch up with the lessons, with the exercises, try to explore trying out Valix for the quiz. And then let's see kung tataas yung grades natin, right? But nothing beats number of exercises na you do, right? So, like what I've mentioned to the people na number one, napapagod, number two, na-overwhelmed. My tip for you is that, alam ko marami kayong mahirap na subject like yung math or even some people are taking stat. Pero if you can just carve out like 1 hour every day to do prac-act exercises in Valix, bare minimum, I feel like it would help your mastery. So my suggestion is that, this is a sample prac-act. Can everyone see the Excel? Can you thumbs up? Yeah. So my suggestion sa prac-act, ideally you do this handwritten. Pero kung nagmamadali kayo, do it in Excel. Now, if you do it in Excel, pay attention to how you structure your solutions. For me, my master solution for bank recon is the adjusted balance method. As in, naka-spoon feed na yan. I just plug it in. And then, ang maganda kay Balik sa prac-act, it actually has an answer key. So what I'm telling you is, how do you maximize your time answering the prac-act? So may problem one. You try answering it by yourself. Pag mali ka, okay lang. Mali ka. Go look at the answer key kagad. And then identify, ano ba yung mali kong understanding? And then apply. So basically, do it once by yourself. Check the answer key kung tama. If tama, that's good. If mali, mark that item down and then make sure you do it again manually, as in handwritten, right? So I prepared my solutions for 16.2, 16.3, 16.4, na I will discuss after this 11:30. So basically parang after this, I will keep the recording ongoing so that I can include this in the discussion. And then I'll post this on Facebook. I'll send the Excel also of how I solved it. But again, sa bank recon, sa petty cash fund, please damihan nyo yung exercises na na kukunin nyo. It doesn't have to be Valix, it can be Waygun, pero importante is may answer key kayo. Right? Sa Waygun kasi I think yung problema ng iba is wala silang answer key. So, Valix nakakabit na kasi yung answer key. So, again, do a lot of exercises for bank recon. Thursday, exercises tayo. Due yung exercise before class. Monday, quiz. So yun. Are there any questions or clarifications? So, if none, thank you so much for attending. Are there any people that want to consult me quickly? Kasi, kindly raise your hand if you want to consult. And then I will okay, so I'll stop the recording muna and then I will consult with these people. And then later I will upload so sa YouTube, ang i-upload ko is yung recorded lecture. Sa Facebook, ang i-upload ko is yung discussion ko sa Valix exercises. Tatry kong damihan pa, but I'm not sure if today or tomorrow, right? So, yeah. Thank you so much, everyone, and have a great day. I'll end the recording.